Warfare in an Age of Mutually Assured Precision. In 1943, the German Fritz X radio-guided anti-ship bomb saw its first successful use, sinking the Italian battleship Roma, after earlier failed attempts against other Allied targets. Since their arrival on the battlefield, the proliferation of precision munitions has had a growing impact on how wars are fought. Once the domain of only the most technologically advanced military powers, the reduction in their size and cost has seen precision munitions becoming increasingly ubiquitous. Warfare has always been an evolution of technology and strategy. Military strategists and scholars must look forward and plan for the next war, no matter how imperfect such attempts may ultimately prove. This essay will examine the implications of the growing preponderance of precision munitions and argues that this will affect the strategic, operational, and tactical levels of war in ways that are yet to be fully realized. Fortunately, a war truly dominated by precision has not yet occurred. As a result, this essay will contemplate a hypothetical future conflict, a war of mutually assured precision. This can be defined as a peer-on-peer conflict between two technologically advanced states, where antagonists have deep inventories of modern precision munitions combined with the technical, logistical, targeting, and surveillance acumen to employ them effectively at scale. This scenario is not intended to be exhaustive or to be inclusive of lower-intensity conflicts, such as counterinsurgency operations. Instead, it is intended to serve as a lens for examining the implications of the growth of precision munitions and to be a basis for stimulating broader discussion. Broadly defined, precision munitions have the ability to be guided to a specific target point or to sense and track their target to achieve a desired effect. This covers the full spectrum from relatively short-range systems, such as guided anti-tank weapons, through to all types of missiles, guided artillery shells, and rockets. Public discourse when referencing precision munitions has tended to have a particular focus on long-range strike capabilities, and as a result, precision is often seen as synonymous with long-range. This essay, however, will focus on the implication of precision munitions more generally, inclusive of capabilities across the range spectrum. Unlike the Cold War concept of mutually assured destruction, which theorized a reduced risk of war between belligerents possessing weapons of mass destruction, the growth in conventional precision capabilities could have the opposite effect. This is not to say precision munitions lack deterrence value before hostilities commence, given the costs they can impose. Equally, the use of carefully timed and targeted precision strikes could also prove effective in achieving a level of deterrence or de-escalation during a peer-on-peer conflict in some scenarios. That said, once the decision to resort to military force has been made, the conventional escalation options that precision munitions offer could prove hard to control. A true peer-on-peer conflict is a worst-case scenario and represents a potential existential threat, or at the very least, comes with a significant cost burden and risk level for the states involved. As such, in the face of the high costs of strategic failure against a peer threat, the ability to rapidly prosecute the full spectrum of targets conventionally at all ranges increases the viability of military power as a tool to achieve policy outcomes. This may also increase the possibility of intentional or unintentional escalation, such as through the relaxation of targeting restrictions. The potential loosening of targeting restrictions will not be without considerable risks. The red lines for participants may be uncertain, and the threshold between conventional and nuclear use may be thinner than previously thought, especially if a nuclear-armed state's home territory is targeted. There is likewise a danger that some conventional precision munitions are also nuclear-capable. Their use against a nuclear-armed opponent carries the very real risk of being mistaken for a nuclear strike. This is a risk that has been characterized as warhead ambiguity. This essay will remain primarily focused on the conventional implications of precision munitions. However, the strategic nuclear dimension cannot be sidelined and is undoubtedly a topic worthy of its own detailed consideration at another time. Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine represents an important area for examination and is the latest iteration of the use of precision munitions on a large scale in conventional warfare. Although arguably not a conflict dominated by precision munitions, as unguided munitions are still prevalent. The war in Ukraine has seen the widespread deployment of precision capabilities by both sides. As such, the conflict can be seen as illustrative in some respects when considering the impact of precision munitions more generally. Strategic implications. At the strategic level, a war of mutually assured precision will be unlike anything yet experienced. As the ongoing war in Ukraine has demonstrated, warfare in the modern age is a trial of industrial, financial, and military strength. It is also a trial of collective willpower and maintaining the morale necessary to continue fighting in the face of the costs imposed by an adversary. Outwardly, this shares many similarities with total wars of the past. However, a war of mutual precision will further reduce the distinction of definable front lines, even for warring nations separated by significant distances. Conflict is a spectrum that ranges from limited and low intensity to open and total, where few, if any, limits or rules are adhered to. Mutually assured precision will have the effect of pushing even limited wars into conflicts that are increasingly total in conduct. Precision technology expands the number of viable targets and increases the ability to strike a wider range of strategic infrastructure. This will support multiple escalation levers for decision makers, both political and military, and will drive a tendency for target sets and rules of engagement to be expanded. The increasing prevalence of long-range precision munitions allows an adversary to compress time and space for targeting purposes and lowers the price of entry to deliver effects at the strategic level. Where previously it was a capability that required expensive assets beyond the reach of all but the most wealthy and powerful states, such as long-range bombers, precision munitions are now becoming more accessible. The capability provided by precision munitions increases the viability and perhaps attractiveness of striking a state's entire industrial, economic, and political architecture. This will include any civilian dual-use support systems that are seen as linked to the generation of military power. The pressure to loosen targeting restrictions is likely to increase if a conflict becomes protracted and costs rise. Conversely, the ability to target an entire nation's military capabilities and infrastructure may drive attempts to avoid protracted conflict. With the costs of modern industrial warfare so ruinous, the massed employment of precision munitions to rapidly overwhelm a peer opponent at the outset of conflict through a coup de main will become both more attractive and more possible. The factors mentioned above also carry notable implications for the likelihood of conflict escalation and strategic miscalculation. If the conflict includes nuclear-armed states, the risk of nuclear war will be present to some degree by default. However, the level of risk will only increase if a belligerent believes that deep, wide-ranging conventional strikes threaten their nuclear deterrent capabilities. This danger will need to be carefully considered and may act as a dampening effect on targeting priorities, even making some conventional precision munitions, those with warhead ambiguity, potentially unusable due to the risks involved. Targeting by both sides in the war in Ukraine, although sometimes poorly executed, provides a glimpse of the future. From a military perspective, military bases, logistics hubs, maintenance facilities, training establishments, defense industry sites, fuel and munitions storage sites, and dual-use civilian infrastructure, such as transport links, bridges, airports, and seaports, have all been subject to precise targeting. In a war of mutually assured precision, it is also highly likely that hostile forces, as Russia has amply demonstrated, will seek to strike critical civilian infrastructure, such as power, water, and communications, as well as those targets seen as supporting the political and societal will to fight. Countering the impact of precision munitions will require national-level efforts, both defensive through investment in systems, such as layered integrated air and missile defense, and pragmatic, such as building an infrastructure redundancy and premising crisis planning on the loss or damage of key facilities. It will also be necessary to have the technical, logistical, and workforce capacity to effect repairs and implement workarounds when damage is sustained, potentially over an extended period. Although civilian populations have proven to be resilient in the face of aerial bombing, pre-prepared information operations will also be necessary to limit the damage to national morale sought by an adversary. At the strategic level, military planners will have to operate and plan on the assumption that previously safe force generation mechanisms, such as fixed training and simulation facilities, will be damaged or destroyed. Likewise, the ability to craft strategic-level campaign plans based on access to known support systems, such as major air and naval installations, will be vulnerable to being compromised by enemy action in ways not previously possible. Operational implications. At the operational level of war, the effects of precision munitions will be profound. This includes a growing ability to reduce unwanted collateral damage, such as in dense urban fighting, and to rapidly strike even mobile high-value targets. Another effect may prove to be the ability to quickly generate or rebuild operationally relevant light forces due to the modest training burden that modern light precision munitions require. The most consequential implications at the operational level, however, may be those related to logistics. Modern industrial warfare requires logistics on an enormous scale. Modern fighting forces consume fuel, food, munitions, and all manner of supplies at a prodigious rate. Equally, modern military aircraft, warships, and combat vehicles must have access to regular resupply and maintenance to remain effective. This is before the effects of battle damage are considered. Traditional approaches to these requirements include establishing forward operating bases and logistics hubs in rear areas to allow forward units to be rapidly supplied and equipment repaired. Russia adopted a largely traditional and rigid approach to logistics during its invasion of Ukraine. It centralized munitions, fuel, and other critical supplies behind the front line in depots that relied on limited and inflexible mechanisms to facilitate distribution to forward units. The introduction of the M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, HIMARS, along with other precision strike systems, have revealed just how vulnerable these inherently fixed locations have now become, especially when sufficient stocks of precision munitions are available. Russian logistics points across Ukraine have become an endangered species and have been destroyed with alarming regularity. Other operational-level support mechanisms have also been ruthlessly targeted, including airfields, command and control systems, electronic warfare complexes, headquarters, and vehicle repair and maintenance hubs. These attacks have crippled Russian forces at the operational level and resulted in numerous casualties among command staff and specialist support personnel. It has also resulted in a marked decline in the ability of Russian forces to maintain a high operational tempo, with frontline units being choked off from resupply and suffering disrupted command and control. The supply shortages have also likely had the second-order effect of increasing the prevalence of looting and ill discipline among Russian forces. Future operational commanders will need to adapt to an inherently vulnerable support network. Additionally, the ability to build and stage operational-level logistics, reserves, or maneuver forces to support large-scale offensive operations will be subject to the continued threat of interdiction by precision fires. This will drive a more dispersed posture at the operational level and an increased reliance on deception and camouflage techniques than required in the past. Operational-level commanders will have to work increasingly hard to minimize vulnerabilities, while maintaining the critical ability to coalesce sufficient forces at decisive points or in response to enemy action. Tactical implications. At the tactical level of war, the reduced size and cost of precision munitions greatly enhances their prevalence and utility. If a frontline asset or unit can be located, precision munitions ensure it can and will be targeted. The conflict in Ukraine has demonstrated some of the realities that will be faced in a war of mutually assured precision. The proliferation of relatively simple uncrewed aerial systems, UAS, in Ukraine has blurred the lines of precision. Even low-technology dumb munitions, such as unguided mortar shells and grenades, can now be used to reliably and precisely strike vehicles and personnel. These weapons, combined with precision artillery systems, loitering munitions, and guided direct-fire anti-tank missiles, such as the FGM-148 Javelin and Next-Generation Light Anti-Tank Weapon, and LAW, have made the tactical battle space an increasingly lethal and complex environment. Individual soldiers are now subject to around-the-clock targeting by precision munitions across the length and depth of frontline and rear area positions, often with little or no warning. The proliferation of precision fires capabilities will make static defensive land warfare harder to sustain, as traditional defensive techniques provide little protection against precision munitions supported by near-constant surveillance and agile targeting. This may drive a greater willingness to utilize congested urban terrain for concealment to improve unit survivability, regardless of the increased risks to civilian populations. The threat envelope of precision munitions will also continue to grow, and this may require an increased acceptance of risk when deploying valuable air and naval assets if battlefield objectives are to be achieved. This carries the clear implication of attrition and may represent a larger risk for smaller forces that lack the depth to absorb losses, further limiting the tactical utility and flexibility of high-value assets. The persistent threat of munitions descending unexpectedly at any moment will also have a corrosive effect on the morale of combat units exposed to a sustained menace where no countermeasures are readily apparent. Akin to the known impacts of snipers, the precise nature of the threat, being hunted at an individual level, represents a distinct difference to the randomized threats of shelling or bombing in past conflicts. Numerous incidents of Russian and Ukrainian forces suffering drone fright have been seen in the war in Ukraine. This may prove to be the key morale challenge associated with prolonged exposure to the constant threat of small-armed UAS. This will require close observation and, where possible, mitigation by tactical-level commanders to ensure unit cohesion and morale is sustained. The ubiquitous use of precision fires across the tactical level will force changes in how operations are planned and conducted. This will include the need for ironclad signal security, enhanced signature reduction and camouflage, and innovative deception techniques. Survival will also require the skillful deployment of layered defensive systems to defeat or degrade incoming precision munitions. However, the cost and complexity of defending against agile precision munitions will make this difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. But perhaps the greatest consequence emerging from the threat of precision munitions at the tactical level may be an increase in the preference for mobility over static defense. In a war of mutually assured precision, any static defensive operation will quickly trend towards one of costly attrition. Although traditional defensive operations will still be required in many scenarios, increased mobility for combat forces and their supporting logistics may become essential for survival at the tactical level. As demonstrated by the need for artillery systems to become highly mobile to survive in Ukraine, fixed systems or static units are becoming unacceptably vulnerable to rapidly deployable precision munitions. Although still vulnerable, forces employing mobile tactics and techniques will complicate precise targeting and will have increased survivability over those in static positions when combined with defensive technologies, such as active protection systems and electronic warfare. Planning considerations: intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare. ISRU. Precision munitions, by their nature, are heavily reliant on accurate targeting information, especially over longer distances and against maneuvering land, air, and maritime targets. In a war of mutually assured precision, ISRU capabilities will be the critical enabler in leveraging precision munition capabilities and in degrading those of the adversary. Already an essential element of high-intensity conflict operations, ISRU capabilities, tradecraft, and rapid data sharing will need to become an even more integral embedded capability at all force levels, including readily disposable or replaceable capabilities for small tactical units. This will require sufficient inventories, combined with sustained investment and training to produce professionalized and layered ISRU effects that are resilient to enemy action and losses. In conjunction, the time available to observe, orient, decide, and act (ODA) for commanders at all levels is reduced significantly by the prevalence of precision munitions. Speed of action and command will be increasingly vital to success. Decisions to utilize precision fires, to redeploy vulnerable units and assets, or take advantage of maneuver opportunities will need to be taken rapidly without recourse to higher headquarters. This will require a strengthening of existing mission command principles and new tools and techniques that increase timely access to ISRU capabilities and data by commanders beyond those currently available. Planning considerations: air and missile defense and deception. In the face of precision munitions able to prosecute targets across a nation's industrial, political, and military architecture, as well as deep into the battle space, defensive and deception systems will become critical to sustaining combat power. The traditional Western bias towards reliance on air forces as the core element of air defense has resulted in relatively low levels of investment in ground-based air and missile defense capabilities since the end of the Cold War. The war in Ukraine has amply demonstrated that layered ground-based air and missile defenses, including against rockets and artillery, have become a necessity to provide some level of protection against the growing threat of precision munitions. Layered air and missile defense capabilities will be essential in denying an adversary's ability to fully leverage their precision fires capabilities and in dictating the tempo of operations. Coordinated air defenses will also be a key element in denying, degrading, or destroying hostile ISRU assets, such as aircraft, helicopters, and UAS of all sizes, in addition to defeating precision munitions themselves. Mobility for these capabilities will be essential, as even advanced fixed ground-based air and missile defense systems may prove unacceptably vulnerable and will require increased mobility and supporting tactics to prevent their targeting and destruction. Even with increased investment in air and missile defense capabilities, it will be necessary to accept and plan for their inherent limitations. The effectiveness of current air and missile defense systems, especially against modern precision munitions, is likely to be low, and the cost-benefit ratio will remain firmly with the attacker over the defender. The task of fully mitigating the threat of precision munitions is likely to prove insurmountable, and other strategies to protect vulnerable targets, such as critical military and civilian infrastructure, may be necessary. Increased consideration will need to be given to the hardening of likely targets to reduce the damage inflicted and complicate adversary targeting options. Additionally, where possible, increased system redundancy will need to be designed in, and the costs, in both financial and efficiency terms, of having higher numbers of smaller dispersed facilities may also need to be accepted. In the face of the persistent threat of precision munitions and the practicable limits of air and missile defense, physical and electronic deception techniques will need to be priority areas for investment, innovation, and training. Military assets, units, and personnel across the strategic, operational, and tactical domains will need to become adept at deception tradecraft combined with mobile operations to increase their survivability. This will need to include deliberate planning and capability creation to achieve, where possible, some level of deception for civilian and dual-use critical infrastructure. Using physical and electronic decoy systems to try and make an adversary waste weapons, as widely seen in Ukraine, will also become an essential element of warfare in an environment dominated by precision fires. Planning considerations: munition inventories. Precision munitions range from the complex and expensive through to relatively low technology, low cost, modified commercial off-the-shelf systems. As such, not all precision munitions are necessarily expensive, even when compared to more traditional unguided munitions. The war in Ukraine reinforced the essential truth that modern industrial warfare consumes munitions of all types at a prolific rate. The shell crisis being experienced in many Western nations as they seek to support Ukraine should not come as a surprise to any student of military history. Although the accuracy of precision fires does greatly reduce the number of munitions required to deliver a specific effect in comparison to unguided weapons, the ability to conduct precise targeting does not guarantee a commensurate reduction in munitions expenditure. To the contrary, precision munitions increase the ability to hit time-sensitive targets and open up a wider number of assets across the tactical, operational, and strategic theaters to targeting. The war in Ukraine has demonstrated that even major powers, with theoretically deep munitions inventories, will likely struggle to meet the demand of modern conflicts. The war in Ukraine, especially for Russia, has seen a gradual shift to reliance on older systems as stockpiles of high-end, exquisite precision munitions run low. Since defense budgets will always have limits, a war of mutually assured precision, especially if protracted, may see advanced precision munitions having to be rationed, even when viable targets are identified. The requirement to reduce, or even cease, the use of some munition types to maintain a strategic reserve for contingencies can be reduced, but not overcome, by holding increased inventories. Even having a robust domestic production capacity is not a supply guarantee, as such facilities and their supply chains will also be high-value targets for an adversary. Planning assumptions will need to ensure precision inventories, especially of high-end, exquisite systems, are used sparingly and sufficient inventory remains available to support decisive points during a conflict. An acceptance in planning assumptions that wars may trend towards attrition as each side attempts to run the other out of precision munitions to gain an advantage may also be necessary. In parallel, adaptive techniques and technologies should be exploited to allow for the more effective utilization of inventories of cheaper and more easily produced legacy or unguided munitions. Conclusion: agility by default. Warfare in an age of mutually assured precision will not resemble the methodical and meticulously crafted coalition campaigns of recent memory. Unlike the recent past, which has been dominated by counterinsurgency operations, the future will require a return to and expansion of core high-intensity warfighting skills. Wars of mutually assured precision will be more sudden, violent, costly, total, and carry greater risks. Regardless of who initiates a conflict, the entirety of a nation's infrastructure, both military and civilian, will be vulnerable from the commencement of hostilities. That vulnerability will remain persistent, and the ability to create relatively safe rear areas to support logistics and force regeneration activities, or to shelter civilian populations from war's realities, will be compromised to an extent not hitherto experienced. The cost and complexity of mitigating these vulnerabilities across the strategic, operational, and tactical levels will likely prove to be insurmountable in the face of the practicable limitations of defensive systems. Likewise, possessing ample precision munitions may prove no guarantee of either deterrence or victory. Losses are going to be taken, essential infrastructure damaged or destroyed, and planning assumptions compromised. Military strategists will find themselves in a constant battle of agility against their adversaries, as they seek to make full use of the advantages that precision munitions bring while also degrading those of the enemy. At the national level, this will require a more comprehensive approach to warfare, where the threats and opportunities from precision munitions are assumed and ingrained in operational art at all levels, as well as in the political calculations that can lead to war.